The Koffler Gallery is proud to present the world premiere of a heart-wrenching and fascinating exhibition, The Synagogue at Babin Yar, Turning the Nightmares of Evil into a Shared Dream of Good. Opening on the eve of Yom HaShoah, April 17th, and running until November, the multidisciplinary exhibition tells the bittersweet story of the Babin Yar Synagogue, which stands on the grounds of the first large-scale massacre of the Holocaust in 1941. Experience the full historical, political, artistic, and spiritual context of this incredible monument for the first time. The exhibition is free of charge. To learn more, visit kofflerarts.org.
This is Bonjour Chai, the Zionist occupation of the dance floor edition. I'm Avi Feingold in Montreal, and I'm here with Phoebe Maltbovi in Toronto. We are your Frozen Chosen. On today's show, two amazing topics for you. One, François Legault's big Easter Monday gaffe on Twitter. Was it a gaffe? Was it not? What do we say about this? Does it really show his true colors? We're going to dive into the latest issue on secularism in Quebec. And in honor of Yom ha-Atzmaut, we are going to present to you some of our favorite music about Israel. Is it just about music? Is it speak something larger about the culture? We'll find out. So stay tuned. All of that and so much more. Phoebe, how's it going?
It's going all right. It's been a long extended Easter weekend. I say Easter intentionally because that seems to be a really big thing here in Canada, which I wrote about for the CJN before even realizing how big of a topic secularism and how you look at Easter in Canada was going to become in Quebec.
This week has been more serene. It's been a really busy few weeks because of Passover and the like. I don't know if you, were you aware that there was this massive ice storm that hit Montreal on Erev Pesach?
I was aware of it. I was not impacted by it, but I was aware of it. So tell us about the ice storm.
We didn't lose power. We live in Westmount, which is a suburb in the part of the city. We have our own separate power station, and all the wires are buried. But really, thousands and thousands of Jews lost power right on the eve of the Seders. People didn't get it back for 3 days. My parents were out of town, but their house was affected. They didn't have power for 3 days. They had to throw out their whole freezer, which, if you're a Moroccan Jewish mother, that's thousands of dollars of, it's a stocked freezer. No, I'm kidding. They have an insurance policy. It's fine. And people were in shul. They missed Seders. They had Seders at candlelight. There was no heat. It was a problem. People were going to other families. It was kind of a big deal, and I think that people will remember this year's Pesach because of that for a long time. And then the weird thing was, like a week later, it was in the mid-20s. In terms of temperature. So
the weather's been really, really weird in Toronto as well. I noticed that I was putting my somewhat sunburnt arms into my warmest winter coat because of the weather shifts we've been having. Canada. We are not joking about this Frozen Chosen thing.
Yeah. What's been coming across your transom lately?
So there was recently an article, a news article, so I had nothing to do with it, by Jeremy Apple in the CJN on our website. Tariq Khan, a member of Alberta's new Multicultural Council, resigns after a history of anti-Semitic posts are revealed. The article ends, Khan did not reply to a request for comment from the CJN. Well, it seems that he now has responded and has apologized. To us Jews for...
to the CJN on behalf of all Jews.
Okay.
For all we know, he has sent out this email to several other Jewish organizations.
Yes,
and
that's possible. So I had not been particularly closely following the story, but I'll just say, on behalf of every single Jew in the world, including who has also not been following the story, apology accepted. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next thing.
I mean, the only reason why I want to dwell on this is because I am a fan of apologies, and they're increasingly rare these days, especially ones that are you may say that this is a PR move, but it is a full-throated apology, right? The letter that we got was unequivocal in its statement of saying I was wrong in doing what I did. And we see that less and less these days.
I don't know how much I have to add apart from that. I just think the sort of culture of demanding apologies from people for old tweets, and then what tends to happen in these cycles, because I have seen it so many times, not just to do with anti-Semitism, but really any topic, is someone will apologize, and then the apology will be Talmudically level, sort of
obfuscation,
close read, and then it becomes like, can you believe they said this or that? And then it just keeps going and keeps going. And that's what I hate. So when I see an apology, I'd almost want to not look at it too closely and just be like, okay, it seems like it's a sign, the fact that there even is an apology, not just about a person who's made it, but that we live in a society where certain things are, not acceptable. I think that's a good thing. Fine, we move on. You know what I mean? Rather than nitpicking.
I don't want to dwell on it. Yeah. But yes, I'm just saying it so that other people can apologize and not necessarily feel like they're compelled to, but actually just go and do it when they realize they did something wrong.
Right.
Speaking of apologies or non-apologies about tweets, let's get to a famous one that will be our next topic right after we hear from our sponsors.
Are you in the market for a new watch or a special piece of jewelry? Are you looking for the perfect engagement ring to pop the question? Atelier Lou has all this and more. Eric and the team at Atelier Lou can craft a piece for you, or you can select from some of the exclusive designers that they offer. From a simple bangle to a statement necklace, Atelier Lou can make you or your loved ones sparkle. Located in the heart of Westmount in Montreal or online at atelierlou.com, visit Atelier Lou for your next watch or jewelry purchase. And when you do, make sure to use promo code BON18 for 10% off your next purchase. That's atelierlou.com.
All right. So on April 10th, Easter Monday, Quebec Premier François Legault tweeted out a column from the Journal de Montréal columnist Mathieu Bock-Côté entitled Éloge de notre vieux fond catholique, or In Praise of Our Old Catholic Background, right? So his support...
You weren't the author of that article? It seemed kind of like your style.
I mean, I am in praise of old backgrounds. Sometimes they are religious. I think that is fine to be proud of one's previous heritage, religious or secular. The problem, though, is that his support is for a view that Quebec history is inextricably tied to its Catholicism. And while that may actually be true, this doesn't come out great and it led to entire backlash, with many calling out the hypocrisy, right? Because what was François Legault all about in the past few years? He ran through Bill 21, ushered in a supposed...
Which is what?
Ushers in a supposed secular culture in Quebec, right? So Bill 21 is a law that was passed in 2019. It basically promotes secularism as a value, as a prime value within Quebec society. And as such, the major implication, there are other implications to this bill, but the major one that everybody talks about is that any public individuals in a position of power, so that's civil servants in a position of authority, such as judges, police officers, prison guards, et cetera, as well as public school teachers. So teachers in a public school setting are prohibited from promoting any religious faith by even wearing garments that are associated with a given faith. And there's this famous infographic that they put out to make it seem like it's super simple for everybody to worry about, right? So you can't wear a big cross, you can't wear a kippah, you can't wear a hijab.
Okay, I'm just going to go and remove the enormous cross. It's just weighing me down. That you can't see because it's audio, but it's just right obvious. You can see me.
It's a massive gold crucifix. You got this one from the Pope.
It's enormous. The Pope, who's sitting right next to me. Absolutely. I'm recording from the Pope Mobile.
Yeah. So, look, there's actually a background to this. This is not originally a Quebec thing. It has a background in France, right? Phoebe?
It does.
Fill us in on what happens in France and then how it maybe makes its way over to Quebec.
Okay, so the how it makes its way over to Quebec part is going to be the mystery for me, precisely because I'm a little bit confused about sort of what relationship sort of early 20th century, especially happenings in France would have to Quebec. Because basically with France, there was the 1789 French Revolution, which was very much anti-clerical, very much about having a French nation with no religion, in the spirit of the French Enlightenment, Voltaire, all of this, right? And that's how you got this thing where there are these French citizens with no sort of hyphenated identity. That's where that idea of like French secular republicanism, that's where that comes from. And then this gets reinforced in 1905 with the law separating church and state, which is sort of right after the Dreyfus affair. So you really get this like intense tradition in France, sort of like after wars of religion, but also in theory, keeping French national identity open to people of all ethnic backgrounds, but this idea of a really like a purely secular French identity. And that's always challenged, and still it has always been and always probably will be challenged by, not just religious people of all different backgrounds in France, but also there's something a little bit tricky where, like, for example, anti-veiling is where this comes up the most. Like legislation against Muslim women wearing veils in public places, headscarves in public places. And the question, you're in certain contexts, and then the question always is this secularism, or is this, in fact, enforcing a sort of quasi-secular, sort of Catholic norm everywhere? Like what's pro-secular and what's discriminatory? And that's always been this tension. And I say all this not to resolve it, not to give my own sort of complicated thoughts on it, but just, I guess what I'm saying is that I don't entirely understand, just since I do know the French case well and not really the Quebec one much at all, where that fits in what's happening in Quebec.
How is this played out in the mid to late 20th century in France, or even into the 21st century? I feel like it's something that is not quite settled law, but everybody accepts that it's there. Everybody knows that laïcité, which is the French term for secularism, is part of the culture. People accept and move on with it, even if some people don't like it. Are there legal challenges to it? Or is this a mischaracterization of the entire approach?
I mean, I think what's happened is as there's been more immigration and also more of an embrace of kind of a type of multiculturalism in France, of hyphenated identities and so forth, I think it's not anymore just a default that a liberal approach is a pro-secular approach, if that makes sense. Meaning like politically, if you're politically on the left, where does that put you, Meaning there are people that are on the left that are pro-religion, and that are okay with, or that are pro ethnic diversity, which effectively means being pro religion. So I guess there's this thing where secularism in France is both secularism and kind of promoting this culturally Catholic maybe patrimony. It's complicated because there are also a lot of like, I guess what I'm wondering is secular in Quebec code for anything other than secular? Does it generally mean sort of like how associated is it with sort of like anti-veiling, but like could an elementary school teacher talk about Easter? Yeah. So look, I think that Quebec always looks towards France for, for ideas, right? I had a French teacher in high school who was French, and this isn't entirely true. This is a gross mischaracterization and stereotyping, but I think that there's a grain of truth to this. So he'd be like, the difference between France and Quebec, right? Quebec looks to France as this like wonderful land with like culture and amazing laws and ideas and philosophy, and Quebec sees itself as like France's little sibling, like we do everything with our big brother or whatever like that, or big sister, I guess. And you look at France towards Quebec and it's like they don't even think about it, right? It's like, it's this like provincial backwater that like how many French people come to Quebec to perform in terms of artists, and then vice versa, you have like maybe one or two, right? That was like his sort of example. Right. So I think that laïcité was this idea of secularism was inevitably going to make its way to Quebec in a big way. Everybody
everybody basically realizes the transparency of what's going on here, in that the thing that is happening is that Quebec is afraid of veils, is afraid of hijabs, is afraid of all of these things, and basically created a law counter to all religions in order to make sure that Muslim radicals aren't teaching our little kids in school. Right.
So this is okay. This gets to another whole angle of this that I wanted to bring up, because before all of this happened, I wrote for the website about my understanding as an American Jew living in Canada of kind of the place of Easter in Canada, because I find this baffling. Not only how many days are national holidays, but just how day to day assumed it is that you care about Easter, which growing up in New York would be assumed if you're Christian, like observantly Christian. I don't mean like Christian as in not Jewish and some white person of a maybe Christian background. I mean, like, if you are a churchgoer, you care about Easter. Here in Canada, I was wished Happy Easter at a supermarket. Easter is a huge thing at the ostensibly secular schools and daycares my children go to. It is a big deal, and it's national holidays.
You recognize that there is the separation between church and state is fundamentally different in Canada than it is in the U.S. in that there is officially a separation, but there might be a recognition that if the majority of people are celebrating X, well, then we have to close down school for the day, or we should mention it and put it on a calendar, whatever it might be. And Quebec seems to have no problem with Easter. Quebec seems to have no problem even to a certain extent with Judaism, because they don't see, like, we've been integrated into, the culture for long enough.
Yeah.
Israel, Palestine might be different.
That was different when my grandmother was growing up.
I was going to say,
yes.
There's a lot of work around that. But at the end of the day, the real culprit, right, in religion creeping into Quebec society is Islam. And I actually think it's to the detriment of the Jewish community, is that the establishment Jewish community has basically chosen to sit this one out, with certain notable exceptions. I know that there are lawyers that are Jewish that are fighting against this. There are definitely small organizations that are pushing this. But at the end of the day, the major Jewish organizations have stepped back and said, this is not our fight. And in their minds, it's not their fight, because there are not many, if any, Jewish police officers. There are very, very few, if any. There are definitely a few, but really, really few Jewish teachers that are Orthodox and want to wear a scarf to cover their hair or wear a kippah in public schools. And as a result, they're like, okay, look, if it's going to affect 5 people, they're going to have to take one for the team. And it's really about the hundreds and hundreds of Muslims. And let's be honest, we're not so cool on Islamophobia, right? We think that they're all terrorists anyways. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not speaking this. I'm saying this on behalf of like the mental state of a lot of Jews.
Avi, you're canceled. You're canceled.
Right. And therefore, they have sat this one out. And I think that it is tremendously problematic for that. And here is this gaffe that brings it back up and basically shows the world that Quebec basically doesn't have a problem with some faiths. They just have a problem with others. Right. Catholicism, that's our heritage. That's important. Right. It happened actually that line was already in the culture. That idea was already in the culture when they said that they're removing religion from all public spaces except for the cross in the National Assembly, because they were like, that's a historic and cultural symbol. Right. So, but I'm interested, enough about this history of laïcité, of secularism.
Yeah.
Right. When it's brought forth, do you say that this is like mildly preposterous? Like somebody,
I see it as hypocritical. I see it as hypocritical.
Let's take a step back. Let's take a step back.
Yeah.
If it was genuinely secular and we really believed that no faith, right? Imagine you're in some pretend Scandinavian country where everything works well, right? I don't know what we're going to call it, Hopelandia. That's the word that they use for Sigaros, their fake language. Anyways, Hopelandia exists and you've moved to Hopelandia and government is totally secular. And they really
is it a little warmer there, I hope?
Yeah, it's all fine. Everything's good.
Okay.
There is faith in the country. There are multiple faiths. There's a lot of different cultures, but the government has an official total secular stance, right? Does that make you feel better? Does that make you feel worse? Do you have a reason to say we need to live in a secular society? Or do you think that the government saying that we're closed for Easter Monday, or that we're wishing people a happy Passover, or that a teacher or a judge wearing a kippah or a hijab actually is going to be biased towards a certain faith and is going to potentially be promoting a certain faith? That's
a few different questions there, I think, Afi. I mean, I think... So, I'll try to separate it out maybe into a few different answers. I mean, one is that I think secularism itself it's complicated because religion isn't any one thing. So religion is always a mix of belief and culture, right? So you can't really ever separate these out completely. And also they're divided differently in Judaism and Islam, in Christianity, and different parts of each one, right? So there's what's religion and what's culture, right? Like can you even ever really divide that? So I think that's one aspect of this. So to say that you're taking everything religious out, well, where are you dividing that line? So that's something that actually came about from the French Revolution, the idea that you even could divide religion from culture. And that's been complicated, right, ever since. So that's one thing. I think a purely secular society has to include allowing people to have their own religious expression, and how exactly that plays out is probably not something that I, in a podcast answer, can sort out. I personally prefer a secular society. I also think if you're Jewish and you really, really are so often, I'll see in different forums online, people will be furious, especially American Jews, about any kind of expression of Christianity in the public sphere. And at a certain point, I do think, look, there is a country where you won't get that. It's called Israel.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And if your feeling
I think we should have more secularism in Israel even.
Yeah, I mean, if your feeling is that you don't like living in a country where virtually everybody cares that it's Christmas, you can either ask everybody to not care that it's Christmas, or you can go to a country where that's not the case. And I think those are the only options. And I think there's only so much that can be done. I think it's nice, a nice gesture if somebody says happy holidays or whatever, but realistically, that's only going to go so far.
On that note, let's move in a completely different direction to a fully secular society, Israel.
Yes, Israel. I don't think there are no religious issues there whatsoever. No religious observance.
So we thought we would take some time and get into some of the music that we love about Israel and use it as a lens for thinking about Israel in general. Phoebe, you love Israeli music, and it was something that really blew my mind when I first got to meet you. And tell me why you love Israeli music, and why don't you start sharing some of your songs, and I'll get into mine soon enough. Sure.
So I do really enjoy Israeli music. I learned about it in a few different ways. I had a friend in college who probably, I don't know how he torrented or whatever, all of it, but he had some kind of huge amount of it. And this was at one point on my computer as well. Then I went on with David Abitbol, the Jewish's Birthright Trip, and they had a mix tape that we all got.
That's kind of cool. I had no idea.
And of the music we listened to on the bus. And there was some overlap, and I'm trying to remember the order of this when I got which music. And then I also took Hebrew for a year in college at the University of Chicago, and then in grad school at NYU did a
Did you take undergraduate Hebrew? Did you take undergraduate Hebrew at University of Chicago?
I did for 1 year.
With Ariella Finkelstein?
Absolutely.
Oh my goodness. She was my Hebrew teacher. She was our Hebrew teacher. Yeah.
No way.
And what she was good at was that every class she presented a song, and that we had to look at the lyrics and then translate them. And that was a way to get into Israeli music.
We did not. So I was in the more beginner class than that, but we did definitely have a lot of music and I think possibly movies, food. It was great. It was a really fun class. So yeah, I mainly did not hear this music actually in Israel, but yeah. So I think it's a lot of great music. Yeah, and I could.
Awesome. Well, I'll get into my story later, but tell me some of the song. A song you're going to play. Start us off with something.
Okay, so the one I might like the most is Beit Habubot Sigapo. גל של הזיות בטבע מאבד מציאות לרגע איך בסוף היא תמיד חוזרת לעצמה ולא די לה פתאום שנדמה שהשחר לא יפציע לעולם אבל עולה זיכרון ישן פתאום שנדמה שהשחר לא יפציע לעולם אבל עולה ומראה לאט.
So why do you love this song? What does it say to you?
It sounds nice. I don't have any profound thoughts about it. I understand that Beit Habubot means doll's house. Is it a reference to Courtney Love and Hole? Is it about literal doll's houses? I do
Wasn't
not
that
know.
Doll Parts?
Is it
the song?
Right, but could be it was Doll Parts, that's true. Okay. I've been out 90s. But
only because I listened to the excellent podcast called 60 Songs That Explain the 90s, which has now expanded to 120 songs, and he spends
I need
like
to
an
listen to
hour
that.
and a half deep dive. Rob Harvilla, it's like excellent. Okay. Please go do that. But anyways.
What I was going to say, though, with this Israeli music is I really like it. And I think part of it is I'm in a weird way, like diving into my own ignorance, because I'm somebody who overthinks things, as you may have noticed, overanalyzes things, reads about them, writes about them, whatever. This is something where I just like what the music sounds like. And in a way, but like if there is a political component to it at all, it's that I think it's really important to remember, especially now, that Israel is more than its current government. Israel is more than its politics. Israel is also culture. And it's nice to just kind of enjoy Israeli culture. And I think there's kind of the cliche of like falafel and all of this. And it's not that that's not nice too. But the music's just kind of fun. And it's a way to remember that Israel is not just debates about Israel.
Awesome. What's next?
I really like the movie Yossi the Jagger or Yossi and Jagger about two extremely handsome Israeli soldiers who fall in love with each other. And I was a big fan of this in grad school.
I was going to call it the seminal Israeli film, but then I realized that that's a really poor choice of words.
No, I think that's the way to go there. I would expect no less. But the singer Ivri Lieder did, I believe it is a cover, Bo, the song.
כשרוחות קרות יסערו בחוץ אשלח בך אש חמה יום אחד אולי תפסיק לרוץ בין הצללים בנשמה.
Yeah, what strikes me about this song always is that it just sounds like a typical power ballad. Mm-hmm. Right, it's very Western.
Yeah.
And it shows the like Western influence on Israeli music at the time, the Western, the North American like rock scene or whatever. Was this just another song for you? What you liked? Was this?
Well, I mean, it's very meaningful in the movie.
Yeah, and you like the movie.
Yeah. I do. Not at all biased by the extremely attractive actors cast in it.
Yeah.
So that's another part of Israeli culture. And I feel like this kind of is almost more of a tie-in with our Hanchi episode.
I was going to say it's actually a tie-in to our first topic with Quebec, because Quebec and Israel are very similar in terms of their cultural output, in that they're a very relatively small population that had to go and develop an entire cultural network of both news and film and TV and music that speaks to a specific culture that isn't necessarily going to be consumed by the wider public, right? So Quebec culture is not picked up by the rest of Canada by and large, right? Whether it's French music, French Canadian music, French Canadian TV, and the same thing happens in Israel, except for that there is a diaspora that picks up on it as well.
Right. Well, there's a French language diaspora that it can kind of join up with a bit.
It can, but
it's so geographically separate.
By and large, it feels right. The touch points feel very, very different in Quebec than in the rest of the rest of Canada, let alone French speaking North America.
Sure.
Right? I can't imagine that the French speakers, in New Orleans are saying to themselves, oh, I really need to see what my cousins, my distant cousins are going up in Acadia, right? What's going on with, French TV there.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. So that's an interesting, piece that connects the culture to it as well. Let me switch. Let me play a couple of things and let's talk about that. I actually have I had no love for Israeli music until relatively recently. I was always listening to Jewish music. I was listening to rock music. I just always felt in my mind that like it seemed kind of like passé listening to whatever Israeli music that people were listening to. Like I remember when I was in university or stage up, like Eyal Golan was like the big one, right? I don't know if you remember Eyal Golan. He was like the big pop star. He had this song. Like I hear that song and I was like, oh, this is what you would hear at any falafel store around the world. You could be in Brussels, you could be in Boston, you could be, I don't know, give me another B city. You could be in Brussels or Boston, around the world, and if you order a falafel, this is what's playing. The heavy Mizrahi influence. He's a pop star, he's looking on the cover in his like, his really cool fake Calvin Klein belt, like with a big belt buckle and all this. Like it didn't sit with me at all. It didn't do anything for me. I was listening to Springsteen. I was listening to Counting
That's
Crows.
a lot less. I was going to say that when you talk about North American influence, you don't get that there.
At all. Exactly.
No, not at all.
And maybe my taste matured, but I distinctly remember that the first major artist that hit me was Idan Reichel. That it clicked
this is
with
somebody
me.
I do know. Okay.
Idan Reichel's song Mima Makim, right? I remember that the first album came out, and then I believe that was the lead single on the second album. And what I found fascinating about it was it was clearly Middle Eastern, right? There was a lot of Middle Eastern influence, but the thing that was fascinating was that he was incorporating indigenous musics of all the various cultures that were being absorbed into Israel at the time. So this song Mima Makim was beautiful because it started with this intro in Amharic, and he had all of this Amharic music that was an influence as part of what was going on in his music, but it was still pretty beat driven. It was fun. It had Western influence, but it also had Middle Eastern influence. And what sat with me also, and this will be a theme as we move forward, it had biblical references in the song, right, in the lyrics, right? Mima makim kirati elayich, right, from the depths I call to you, right? It's deeply a love song, right? It's not an allegory for anything, but it uses a lot of biblical imagery. And I was like, oh, all of these things together, this is the new Israel. This is what like spoke to me. I remember hearing him in Boston, actually, at the Somerville Theater. I covered it. I photographed it for the newspaper at the time. And it was like a beautiful show. And it felt great to be amongst other Jews listening to this music that made sense to me, but that was in a modern idiom using all of this, I wouldn't say cut and paste, but using a collage of ideas from various cultures that were part of Israel and not just Mizrahi.
I want to hear this.
All right, so here's a clip from Mima Makim.
ממעמקים קראתי אלייך, בואי אליי מול ירח מאיר דרכך שוב אליי, נפרסו ונמסו מול מגע של ידייך, באוזנייך לוחש שואל מי זה קורא לך הלילה, הקשיבי מי שר בקול אלייך אל חלומך, מי שם נפשו שתהי מאושרת, מי ישים יד ויבנה את ביתך, מי ייתן חייו ישימה מתחתייך, מי כעפר לרגלייך יחיה, מי יאהבך עוד מכל אוהבייך, מי מכל רוח רעה יצילך, ממעמקים.
That's really good.
Yeah, I think that really reflected to me the new Israel, the new the confluence, like I said, of new cultures, recognition of various indigenous cultures of the Jews that were coming in, and not just purely Mizrahi or purely Ashkenazi, and that's it. And like I said, the segue from that into the next song that I'm gonna play is what happened when a really popular Israeli band called Hadag Nachash came on the scene.
I know this one.
I'm not going to play the famous song Shira Tastiker, their massive explosive hit that I think the lyrics were written by David Grossman, and it was basically they did this rap song that was based purely on lyrics from bumper stickers. And how, Hadag Nachash is actually a play on words from Nahag Chadash, right? Hadag Nachash means the snakefish, and Nahag Chadash is actually new driver, right? Nahag Chadash basically is the sticker you see when you see somebody like who's like a student driver or like their first year, and they put a sticker on there. So that was a play on that. But they did this song, and this recognition that the entire spectrum of Israeli thought for a while was representing everything in bumper stickers. And you can go to Israel and you can see all these cars had so many bumper stickers on them with really great political messages on them. And they went, and I think David Grossman, who is a renowned Israeli author, went and compiled them all and wrote an amazing set of lyrics around this these stickers, and they turned it into a rap, and it became like this massive hit. But they were also the types of people to then go and not just do this amazing rap that they had, and they were a live band that was great. They would also take like traditional songs and update them. And I always like that because these are songs that I knew from a more religious context or from more traditional context, and they're giving it a new Israeli spin, right, in this sort of way. And instead of taking just the lyrics, they were taking the entire song and adapting it, but taking a traditional song that everybody might know. So in this case, it's Shabachi Yerushalayim, which is a very Sephardic song. You hear it played at weddings and other random events, so they went and they gave it the Hadag Nachash treatment, and that really sort of clicked with me. What we're hearing there is basically a nice reggae, like dub reggae track, but of a Sephardic song sung by ostensibly, are they secular? Are they religious? They're not wearing kippahs on stage. They could easily potentially be performing this on a Shabbat with a full band and an orchestra and a full amplification. But they're performing a traditional religious song. Right. So what's going on with that? And I think that that's the new Israel. And that's what really spoke to me about Hadag Nachash, was that they were able to bridge these two gaps.
Yeah, that makes sense, and it's all just such nice music.
It's all such
a good time, and you can imagine you're somewhere warmer when you're here in snowy late April Canada.
So I was back in Canada when I heard this last song that I want to play, because to me this is really where we're at in contemporary Israeli music, and the person I'm about to play, I'm going to go hear in a month because he is performing in Montreal. Ishai Ribo was somebody that I heard as soon as his first album came out. I was like, somebody sent it to me who was like, I think you're going to like this. And I remember playing it and then playing it like 5 times in a row. And I rarely do that for a lot of music because I have just so much music available to me. And I'm always playing whatever. Ishai Ribo is a French immigrant to Israel. He grows up very, very religious, doesn't even listen to non-Jewish music, according to what he was saying when he grows up, and then decides that he just wants to be able to perform music that speaks to him. And he started writing songs and started performing them and started recording them. And in 2013, I believe, he came out with an album, and somebody sent it to me, and it clicked with me immediately, because this was somebody that was writing original pop songs in Hebrew that really referenced biblical or religious themes. And they weren't just like, oh my God, I love God. They were complex, and they really reflected this new wave of Israeli singers that were observant, but also in the pop world, and using Judaism as a a tool in their writing palette and not just having, fun like stuff. And, it really immediately hit with me. And so to me, Shai Rebo is the new Israeli music. Like to me, he is the ne plus ultra, as one would say. And I'm very excited that I'm going to go hear him. He's playing in Montreal in a month from now, the end of May. I have seen him once live before in Israel. I have a funny story about that, but we'll hold on to that story for another time. But let me play you the first major single off of the first album that he put out.
רצוף אהבה, ביתו צפוף לרווחה, צפוף לרווחה, ממציא לנו מחילה, לא רק בשעת הנעילה, לך דומיה תהילה, עתידו לתת פר, תחת אפר, שמן ששון תחת אבל.
What I love there is that every line, right, references something else biblically, and it's just a great pop song. And he's this guy that's just exploded. You go to his concert, that song is sung by the entire audience, and they are secular, and they are observant, and they are not, and they're just like, it's the spectrum, and it is really the new Israel for me. And what better way to think about, like, as you said, Israel at 75, than to think about the culture and to walk away a little bit from the really heavy things that are weighing on us. Not that we should be ignoring them. They are very, very important, and I'm sure we'll get back to them in the show at some point in the future. But this is just our way of sending you out there some good vibes and some great songs. And happy birthday, Israel, for that one.
Absolutely. Sounds good for sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's move on to our nachas. Phoebe, what kind of nachas do you have for us this week?
I'm going to do a very wholesome nachas, which is Riverdale Farm in Toronto, where I went with my family over the weekend and where I got somewhat sunburnt, being the pasty Ashkenazi New York Jew that I am. I have that kind of complexion that, the first sign of sun in Toronto, best efforts with sunscreen notwithstanding. But yeah, the baby animals are out. It's really cool. If you have small children and live in or near Toronto, I recommend it's free. You just go. And that was really nice. I'm partial to the baby lambs. There were some baby goats though that are tied for first place in my book.
So Easter.
What about you, Avi?
So Easter.
But do baby animals have? This is when they're born. I mean,
lamb.
It's not.
It's
I don't think they're Christians. But they look like my sadly deceased poodle, so it's more personal than that. It's not. I don't think Jesus particularly enters into it, but poodles might.
All right. I have two. I have two nachases, both related to our Israel topic. So the first one is this piece of news that comes out of Israel and is timed in time for Yom Ha'Atzmaut. What does the name Ofra Haza mean to you?
Nothing.
She was a major pop star in the 80s in Israel. Zohar Argov was also a major pop star in Israel in the 80s. They have both been deceased for almost over. Ofra Hadas died 23 years ago, and Zohar Argov has been dead for 36 years. Right, so they've been dead for a long time. They are being brought back to life, in a manner of speaking. AI researchers are now using their voices from their songs to create a duet that is going to be released in time for Israel's 75th anniversary. Right, I believe the song is actually already out, and we can play a clip for it on our way out. But they use their voices to write an entirely new song and to have them sing it using artificial intelligence to have their voices do a duet. They have never sung together. This is a new song that was written for Israel's 75th, and they are using these two voices. It is both amazingly cool and incredibly creepy. to have.
That's, to me, seems creepy. I'm going to lean towards creepy, but I would have to hear it. Yeah.
And so that is my first piece of nachas. The other piece of nachas I have is if you did like this idea of Israeli music as a lens onto larger Israeli culture and what it speaks about to larger Israeli society in general, our producer, Zach Hoffman, when he was working for Israel Story, produced 4 episodes of Israel Story entitled Mixtape. They are episodes 36 through 39. We will link to them in the show notes. You could find them on the Israel Story website or on their feed, which is exactly this. It was using songs from Israeli culture and history to look at larger stories about Israel. I highly recommend it. It was an amazing set of Israel Story podcasts. You should check them out. It's called Mixtape, and Zach Kaufman was an integral part of the production of that. So go support Zach for that one.
I cannot wait to listen to that. I am so excited about it. Ever since Zach told us about it, I've been waiting for an opportunity to listen to that. Awesome. Sounds amazing.
You told us that Zach told us now. I thought that I was going to be serendipitous. Of course, I knew about this all along. No, I didn't. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's all good. Thank you for listening to Bonjour Chai for the week ending April 22nd, Shabbat Parashat Tazria Mitzorah. The show is produced and edited by Zach Kaufman. The executive producer for CJN Podcast is Michael Freeman. Our music is by So-Called. We are a project of the Jewish Living Lab and are distributed by the CJN Podcast Network. You can listen to all our past episodes on our page at thecjn.ca/bonjour, and you can subscribe to the podcast and automatically receive all episodes on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'd love it if you told a friend about Bonjour Chai. It is one of the best ways we get new listeners. As always, please do email us with comments at bonjour@thecjn.ca. I'm Avi Feingold.
I'm Phoebe Maltz-Bovey.
We both wish you a happy Yom ha-Atzmaut.